Hi, everybody. Just a quick sound check to make sure that we're live. Just stay tuned. We'll be starting as soon as everybody has a chance to log on. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Get settled. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Just wanted to let you know we have over 220 registrants for this webinar, and we just saw that over 100 have gotten on. So we're just going to wait a couple more minutes before we get started, but we're looking forward to it. While we wait, let's have a little fun. In the honor of the holidays, we're going to launch a little poll here. What is your favorite holiday song? Just hang on while the elves work on launching that poll. So there's some good choices on there, but I gotta admit, my favorite, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, did not make the list. Our elves are watching the poll data come in behind the scenes. And as soon as they're ready, we will see the results. All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey. Good choice. Thanks, everybody. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hold on a second. My screen is not allowing me to advance. There we go. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Cross. I'm the Senior Manager of Youth Competition for the Mid-Atlantic section. I have been on staff with the Mid-Atlantic for almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in the spring. I can tell you it's been an exciting 3 years, primarily focused on launching this national unification for 2021. As a tennis parent myself, I understand that it can be challenging to figure out how to navigate an individual sport and a player development pathway that fits for your child. So I personally am really excited about the 2021 changes. And the purpose of tonight's call is to really give you a chance to understand what we think is important for you to take away from the presentation in terms of essential information you need to know. Before we dive deep into the webinar, I want to make sure that everybody understands the Zoom etiquette of where we are in a virtual world. As I mentioned before, we have over 200 registrants on this call. So all of you have been, forgive us, muted and your video turned off so that we can focus on the presentation. That being said, we know that you're going to have questions along the way, and it's really important that those questions get answered. So that's where the Elves come in. The Elves will be monitoring the Q&A throughout the presentation. So if you have questions that arise, feel free to type them into the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. As I said, they will be monitored. Our Elves, I want to make sure you know who they are. They include Warren Waterman, who's a member of the youth competition team and manages all of our non-ranked play space, which we're going to talk about tonight. We have Lindsay Keeler, who's the Senior Director of Programs and Services. She oversees not only my department as youth, but also adult leagues and community. And then we also have Dee Dee Hughes, Marketing Manager, joining us, and she will particularly be helping if there are any technical issues as you're going through this webinar. Now, again, because we have so many people on the call, we've actually disabled your ability to put questions into the chat. We want you to put questions in the Q&A. However, Dee Dee will be pushing out some resources through the chat throughout the program. Also, I want to make note of the fact that the webinar is being recorded and you will receive a link to the recorded video later this week to use as a resource moving forward. With that, as I mentioned, I'm going to cover a lot of information tonight. Not going to lie, it's the reality of where we're at. So I want to make sure that you know what resources to go to following the webinar with questions that may arise. As a part of this unification for 2021, we have analyzed our own customer service procedure, and we want to make sure that we're providing quick, informative answers. As a part of that, we have launched 2 new email addresses associated with the Mid-Atlantic office. The first one is tournaments@mas.usta.com. We want you using this email address for any questions that arise related to ranked Mid-Atlantic tournaments. If you have questions about how do I get to a national championship, sure, you can ask them to this tournament's email. But what this email is really about is questions that arise specific to events run in our section. We've also launched Youth Play at mas.usta.com. This is where we want all your questions about the non-ranked Mid-Atlantic programming going. That includes our current junior team tennis, junior circuit events that we're going to talk about this evening, and our current 10 and under programming. Now, as I mentioned, the launch to 2021 has been a heavy lift for the USTA. As a part of that lift, we're going to one national system, which I will explain in detail how that works and what it means. But by going to one national system, it also means that some of the administrative tasks that we have done previously at the section level, like running rankings, or in the case of youth progression, checking stars and trophies, et cetera, things like that. Some of those components are actually transitioning over to national staff as a part of this unification. So I've listed here some examples of situations where you're best to reach out to customer care at USTA.com to get your questions answered quickly. Those include, as I mentioned, the new Next Generation Play Tracker, which I will talk about as the replacement for youth progression. Things like shadow rankings, we won't actually be the ones running rankings in our section starting in 2021. And as always, you want to use customer care at USTA.com to address any membership or account questions that you may have. So let's go over the essence of what we're going to talk about tonight. I have 5 key topics and takeaways. First and foremost, I want to make sure that everybody on this call understands why we're changing. I'm going to review the top 5 things people ask. Me and my staff are inundated with emails weekly, and we see themes that arise through those emails. We want to make sure that we address those common themes with everybody here on the webinar. We're also going to go over the top 5 things I want you to know about the transition. Walking away from this webinar, there are some things I want to make sure everybody understands. Examples include registrations or deadlines are changing, and I don't want anybody on this call to miss a registration deadline because they didn't understand what was happening. Unfortunately, we are still in a COVID world, and that means we're also going to talk about what the impact of COVID-19 is going to have on our rollout to this new programming world. Lastly, we've saved some time at the end for additional questions. Now, as I mentioned, more than 200 people registered. So if for some reason we don't get to everybody's questions, I want to reassure you that we're downloading a transcript of all the questions as they come in. We will be sure and send up follow-up email with written answers to any question that does not get addressed on this call. First and foremost, why are we changing? The most important thing that all of you need to understand about why this change is happening is that this change was not made quickly. There were years and years of research and data that went into these decisions. When I joined USTA, it had already been underway for many, many years. Important to understand about that is things were researched, they were piloted, they were evaluated, and then if need be, redesigned, okay? So again, the most important thing that I want all of you to understand is that these are data-driven changes and that we're doing it in the best interest of player development. So all of you understand some snippets of the feedback that we received from that research were things like, it's too competitive, it's too confusing, it's too expensive, I can't play across section lines. The points are no fun for the kids. It's all about chasing points. It needs to be about play. So again, all of the changes that we're going to talk about incorporate these issues. What does that really look like for us? Out of all of that research and data came the American Development Model. It is essentially the playbook for what junior tennis should focus on. Okay? You can see the entire ADM on netgeneration.com. What I'm sharing with you on the screen are the 7 key principles of the ADM, 2 of which are key to our conversation tonight. The first one is it is essential that we have a clear developmental pathway. Second, and near and dear to my heart as a tennis parent, it is essential that the activities we're running are fun and athlete-centered. This is a sport, it's about play and fun, and the kids should be enjoying themselves. Also, I want to point out in this component, we received a lot of feedback about the need to have more team events. So throughout this presentation, you're going to see that team play has been woven in at every level in both the ranked and the non-ranked play space. So let's talk a little bit about the non-ranked play space. Important things to understand about these play opportunities is they are for all ages and all levels. There are play opportunities for ages 5 through 18, and they include all ball colors, red, orange, green, and yellow. Also, as I just mentioned, really important, they offer both team and individual play opportunities. Within the non-ranked space, there are really kind of 3 buckets of play. Those are the products. We have Team Challenge, which offers red, orange, and green ball. It is a low pressure team environment introducing competition without really emphasizing on results. It's all about play, okay? We also have the Junior Circuit Round Robins, offered in orange, green, and yellow. These are non-elimination format opportunities that are individual competition and do emphasize results, and you'll notice ratings. We're going to talk a little bit about ratings and the importance of ratings in the new program moving forward. And lastly, we have our team play bucket. This is an all-encompassing team play opportunity. It includes JTT, what you guys currently know as junior team tennis, which is a team league, a season of play, committing to a season of play with a team, again, in all ball colors, red, orange, green, and yellow. And it's also going to introduce team events. This is new in 2021, and we're super excited about the opportunities in these team events. Something else that's being incorporated into the non-ranked play space is what you all know to be the current youth progression program. It will be transitioned into the Net Generation Play Tracker. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time going into details on the Play Tracker. I do want to let you know that this webinar tonight is a kickoff of many webinars to come, and in particular, a parent webinar in early 2021 run by our own Warren Waterman, talking specifically to the 10 and under play space and the new Net Generation Play Tracker. A couple things I do want to highlight about the new Play Tracker is because we're going to one national system in both the non-ranked and ranked space, there's more flexibility for parents, coaches, and players in this Net Generation Play Tracker. Okay, that includes that you and your 10 and under player can play where you are. You're not tied to section boundaries because we've gone to one unified system. I do want to touch briefly on sort of what are the parameters of play appropriate in the 10 and under space. Generally, it's recommended 5 to 7-year-olds are in red ball programs, 7 to 9-year-olds are in orange ball programs, and 9 to 11-year-olds are in green ball programs. Now, as you all know, there are situations where there may be a very advanced player at a very young age who the coach feels should be progressed to the next ball color, particularly in the case of players under the age of 9. Being built into the Net Generation Play Tracker is the opportunity to be assessed by a Net Generation coach for that player who is under 9 years old to progress into green ball. So again, this is about player development and what is in the best interest of the player. For those of you who have current 10 and under youth progression players, the most important thing that you need to understand is that everybody will be grandfathered on January 1st, 2021. That will be based on their record of stars and trophies totals as of December 16th, 2020. You may have noticed that we offered as many virtual programs as we possibly could in the 10 and under space to try to prepare players for this transition, and that we are ceasing to offer 10 and under opportunities hard and fast to that December 16th deadline. That is so all of the data can be migrated over into the new system. Now I know there's probably questions coming in right now that says, how do I know what the grandfathering looks like? What happens to my kid? So if you go to the link at the bottom of the screen, the Net Generation Play Tracker information landing page that is live on USTA, you can actually see the transition chart. It's called a legacy, and it will tell you exactly how your players' current stars and trophies will be migrated over to the new system. Again, if questions arise in this space, this is becoming a national program, and you want to go to customer care at the national level. Okay, let's take a quick break, test how we did. Let's double check how everybody understood the appropriate ball color for 7 to 9-year-olds. Let's wait for our elves to launch that poll. This is just the secret way for me to be able to have a break from talking constantly during this presentation. But there we go, here comes the answers. Correct, 7 to 9-year-olds are recommended to play in orange ball. Very good, everybody. Okay, so let's move on. Sorry, apparently when we launch polls is when my advancer stops working. Okay, so this little slide, I want to visit the essence again of why we're changing. We are 17 sections across the United States. Within those 17 sections, each of us probably had dozens and dozens of different naming conventions for how we labeled tournaments. The reality of that is, to the consumer, it looked like this slide. Utter chaos, confusing, and it was intimidating. People didn't know where to start. They didn't know how to play. They didn't even know what questions to ask because they couldn't understand where to start. So again, as I mentioned, one of the feedback that we got out of all the research was the need to make it simple. And in particular, as demonstrated by that last slide, we all need to be speaking the same language. So as a part of this structure change that's coming in 2021, all 17 sections will use the same nomenclature, the same naming conventions. A level 5 in North Carolina, a level 5 in Kansas, and a level 5 in California all mean the same thing. By going to one national system, it also means we can go to one national ranking table, which, as I will demonstrate later when we talk about it, will be simpler for all the players involved. I also want to highlight here, not only are we adding team events, but we're going to be adding mixed doubles in 2021. Again, it's about fun play opportunities that the research told us needed to be a part of our products. So let's look at what the ranked play opportunities are going to look like in 2021. Important to note here, you will notice that ranked play specifically refers to ages 11 and 18. As is currently the case in youth progression, and will be the case in 2021, players in the Net Generation Play Tracker need to either be 11 years old or have cleared the Play Tracker to enter our ranked play space, okay? Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be offering both individual and team match play at all levels. There are 7 levels of tournaments. For those of you who are familiar with the current Mid-Atlantic system, you're probably looking at this and going, yeah, that's kind of what we have already. Rachel, what are you talking about? Why are we worried about this? Yes, we as a section have proactively been preparing for this moment since I entered nearly 3 years ago. So we've made gradual changes along the way to our regulations to anticipate this change and make it as smooth as possible for our players. Some comments in general about the overall flow of the levels 7 through 1. A level 7 is a low level intermediate one-day event. It's a simple one day, you go, match play, you're done in a day. That progresses up through more advanced, longer events, ultimately all the way up to level 1 national championships. And for those of you who are relatively new to the competitive world of junior tennis, I'll mention that you'll see the little gray box at the bottom. That refers to ITF, that is the international events played in the United States. Those also factor into the pathway. Okay, so as I mentioned, I get a lot of emails. My email inbox is a little bit scary, not gonna lie. So we want to answer those questions as best we possibly can, and we are always here to answer your questions. But what we wanted to take a minute to do right now is to kind of go over the most frequent questions we get, so you might be better informed and understand the system a little better. So what are those 5 questions? I don't know about the rest of my team, but I get asked, how do rankings work multiple times a day? So we're going to go in detail how do rankings work. We're also going to talk about the difference between ratings and rankings. As I mentioned, ratings will be taking a bigger role in the new platform as it rolls out in 2021. As a parent, I get the next question. I am often asked, how on earth do I know what my kids should be playing? So we're going to talk about that. The one I am most excited about, can we play across section lines and will it count? Yes, we'll talk about how that's going to work. And lastly, at least a few times a month, I get asked, how do we get to the national championships? The national championships are the ultimate level 1, what we call gold ball events in tennis. And understandably, kids with big dreams want to know how to get there. So we're going to answer that for you. Okay. So how do rankings, sometimes called standings, work? Players earn points at ranked tournaments by winning matches. Okay? The number of points they win depends on the level of tournament they're playing. Okay? Those points that they win contribute to their standing. Okay? Most important to understand about rankings is that even if a player has 10 tournaments on their record, it is only the best 6 singles results and 15% of the best 6 doubles that are calculated in those weekly standings lists. Okay, there is often the misconception that if I go play 10 tournaments are going to count towards my ranking. We will always, and the system does this automatically, recalculate each week so that it's your best 6 singles and 15% of your best 6 doubles that are counting. So if you play in tournaments and you continue to improve and go up in levels, your rankings will rise. So we publish what are called weekly standings lists. Those weekly standings lists calculate those 6 best singles and 15% of your best 6 doubles looking 12 months back in the past. So if your player played a tournament this past weekend, that tournament will be considered in their rankings for the entirety of a year and will not fall off their record until the equivalent weekend in 2021. Okay, I mentioned we're going to one national system. That means one national standings list. That means national office is publishing that standing list weekly, and that day will be on Wednesday. You will see, for instance, if you go and look in the boys 16s, you will see thousands of players on the national standing list. That list will be filterable to Mid-Atlantic players. So you will be able to look at the national list and then click Mid-Atlantic and filter down to just the players in the Mid-Atlantic. So again, people are probably wondering, well, this doesn't sound like that big a deal. But here's what's happening on the current list. And this happens quite frequently. We may have a player who is top 10 in the country from our section. Happens all the time. We're a fortunate section. That player doesn't play in our section. They might not even be in the top 100 on our sectional rankings. So there's a discrepancy there. By going to one national system, it means that if a player is the highest ranked player in our section on the national list, when we filter that list to the Mid-Atlantic, they will also be represented as the highest ranked player on the Mid-Atlantic list. It makes sense. It will be simpler, it will be cleaner, and most importantly, it will be a more accurate ranking of players across the country. So a couple of details about rankings, one of which is that we consider rankings both up and down in age division. What does that mean? To use an example, if a player is 12 eligible and chooses to play in a 14 and under event and does well and earns points, those points will be considered 100% down to the younger age division. And if they're one of the best 6 in either their true age division of 12 or the older age division of 14, they will be calculated in the rankings as one of the best 6. Similarly, we do the same thing in reverse. If a player is 12 eligible and plays a 12s event and earns points, we consider 20% of those points from eligible events in the older age division. Why do we do this? So that kids can stay and play in their true age division as long as possible. And when they transition to the older age division, they're not starting from 0. So they're starting with a little bit of a buffer in their standings so they don't have to start over again. So there's basically 2 types of points. There's points per win, which is what happens in a round robin event, such as will be the case for our level 6 and level 7 events. That means, for instance, we have 8 players, we split them into 2 groups of 4, they each play 3 matches. In one draw, one kid wins 3 matches, and another kid in the other draw, another kid wins 3 matches. They both earn credit for each of their wins in their round robin group. Okay. This points per win concept is specific in 2021 just to level 6 and 7 in our section, and any instance where the draw is small enough that we would have to run a round robin at a higher level, 3 through 5. I don't anticipate very many round robins at the higher level events, but the points do exist if we need to do that. So then there's points per round. Points per round, similar to points per win, award points to players based on how they did in the tournament. The difference is points per round are distributed based on where the player finished in the draw. So for instance, if a player from our section plays a level 5, wins the level 5, they're awarded 300 points. The player who finishes third, they will be awarded 180 points. Again, based on where you finished in the draw. There's also something called bonus points. We currently use a bonus point system in our section for the top 100 players. What that means is currently, if I'm ranked 75 in the section and I beat a player in the top 10, I get 50 points for beating that top 10 player. Now, what is happening with us going to a national system is the bonus points will be reallocated based on national ranking and will go much deeper into the ranking. So you might get bonus points for beating a kid ranked 350 nationally, okay? Because again, we're going to one national system. All right, let's take a quick break here and let our poll elves do the work on how many singles and doubles events are counted towards a player's weekly standing. And I know some of you are tempted to answer this one as what you want it to be, not what it actually is. Great job, everybody. Yes, it is 6 for singles and 6 for doubles. All right, now that I've learned that I have to restart my slides, post poll, we are good. All right, the next thing we are going to address is the difference between ratings and rankings. Ratings are a player's range of level of play. Rankings are based on wins in competition, okay? You could have a group of players who all have the same rating. They play in a pool, it will be very competitive match play. Who wins will contribute in the ranked space to who is in what order in the rankings themselves. They both have value in player development. We're going to talk about how they're woven in to the new system. Remember, I told you there are 2 buckets of play, non-ranked play and ranked play. Non-ranked play generally contributes to ratings. Okay, that is it. There are no rankings in that space. Ranked play contributes to both ratings and rankings, and they both have a place in player development. Now, the most exciting thing, the new system that will launch in 2021 will incorporate ratings and rankings. Full transparency, ratings are not going to be available right off the bat in January, but it will be rolled out early in 2021. So then, of course, I can imagine the Q&A is blowing up with the question, whose ratings? You will start to hear the buzz around the World Tennis Number. The World Tennis Number is what is going to be incorporated into our system. Probably within the next month, they've told us before the end of the year, you will receive an email with a landing page for USTA.com all about the World Tennis Number, including FAQs. For the purpose of this presentation, what you really need to understand is that, again, just like all of the other decisions that have been made, it has been tested, it's been researched, and we're confident in the decision. The other thing to understand is the World Tennis Number was created across numerous tennis federations around the world, so it's quite powerful. All right, before we leave this slide, I want to revisit exactly what the difference is and why we have both of them. Ranked tournaments primarily use ranking for selection. That has always been the case in our section, and it will continue to be the case in the majority of our events. However, now that we have the ability to incorporate ratings digitally behind the scenes, you will also begin to see pilot events using ratings in 2021. We will also heavily consider how ratings are incorporated as we move forward into 2022, okay? So what are the value of ratings? It's kind of what I said before. It's to facilitate level-based play. If we have a bunch of round robins and we can group players by level, those matches will be more competitive, which is in the best interest of player development. Rankings, again, put players in rank order and facilitate selection to our more competitive events. Now I'm going to be a little bit of a downer. For those of you who are passionate about 10 and under rankings, I have to tell you that the Net Generation Play Tracker will incorporate ratings, but will not include rankings. Again, this was a player development decision based in the ADM and what is in the best interest of player development. So this one's near and dear to my heart. How do I know what tournament to play? The key here is creating a plan. That plan needs to be a balanced, developmentally appropriate schedule. And most important is it needs to be about kids continuing to love the game. Nothing breaks my heart more than a kid who's burned out at a young age and walks away from this amazing sport that you can play for a lifetime. So that brings us to the, wait a minute, there's tournaments every single weekend on the calendar. Just to be clear, just because we are offering tournaments every weekend does not mean it is in your child's best interest to be playing tournaments every weekend. So what do? You need to make a plan. I encourage all of you to learn the term periodization. If you're not familiar with it, periodization is a philosophy around planning a schedule that allows for training, rest, and competition. Again, all with the underlying theme of a player developing and growing in the game. Lastly, you need to ask a coach. The tennis coaches who are out there understand player development, and they're there to be a resource for you in planning an appropriate schedule for your player. So years ago, before I worked for USTA, I developed this little mantra at the bottom to kind of help explain to parents the fundamental essence of getting through junior tennis with kids who still love to play. The philosophy is pretty simple. Start small. You want short-term goals and a development plan that supports those goals. Typically, I recommend starting with a 3 to 6 month goals at most. You need to recognize the dream, have the conversation with your kids, whether they want to play on their high school team or they're dreaming of playing on the tour. You want to know what they're dreaming about because it'll help you make a better plan. And lastly, this is to every tennis parent who knows how stressful it can be to sit on the sideline and watch your kid compete. Take a deep breath and enjoy the ride. If the development of a junior tennis player were a road race, I guarantee you it is a marathon and not a sprint. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart as a parent who's been through it. Just everybody take a deep breath, enjoy the time with your kid, and it'll all work out. So this one's a big one. Can we play across section lines and it will count? Yes, 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 you can. Events will be designated as open or closed, okay? Open means that selection is off of that national standing list and is open to players from any section, okay? Closed means that it's selected off of the filtered standing list by section and is limited to players from the section where the event is hosted. Now, please keep in mind, draw sizes, formats, nuances of the rules, including deadlines and selection process may vary across section lines, but fundamental answer is yes, you can play across section lines. Very quickly, we're asked often, how do you get into national championships? Those gold ball events do consider national standing, but they also have additional paths of entry. That includes direct acceptance, which is a list of players reserved for the players at the very highest, in some cases, professional players, internationally ranked players, and our highest ranked national players. You can also get into national championships through national level twos. Those open events are qualifying events for national championships at the national level 2 level. We have something called section quota, which basically means there are a certain number of spots reserved in the draw at every national championship for each of the 17 sections. And I'm going to talk about how that works. And lastly, there's a wildcard process. So section quota lists will replace endorsement lists in 2021. What does this mean? Sections will continue to get a minimum of quota number of players into national championships, okay? The difference is how the lists are calculated. They will be the same across all 17 sections, and they exist to provide a pathway to nationals for those kids who may not be able to afford to travel and play national tournaments outside of their section. What about a kid who's in full-time school and also a concert pianist and just doesn't have the time? There is another path into national championships. The quota lists focus on section play. They will look a little bit different than the national standings list. For 14s, 16s, and 18s, they will be a specialized list that is recalculated where no more than 3 singles and 3 doubles that can count as part of the best 6 can be outside your section, okay? In the 12th division, it's even fewer. No more than 2 singles or 2 doubles can be counted if they were played outside of your section. Again, this is about making sure that every player has a path to national, even if they're not flying around the country and playing national tournaments. So I know we're going through a lot and I'm going to keep on going, so just hang in with me. There are some essential takeaways I want to make sure everybody understands about this change. As I've mentioned before, every section is not the same, and you need to understand those differences. I'm going to highlight some changes, particularly in the level 6 and 7 and level 5 space and how they impact our players. We're talking about event registrations and deadlines, and we're going to revisit again open and closed events and make sure everybody understands. So obviously the 17 sections are very different. We have different geography, different facilities, populations, climate, etc. The new regulations allow for sections to make decisions that best meets the needs of our players. Some examples of what we as a section determine: draw sizes for our section events, draw and match format for those events that are within our section. We also plan the overall schedule of section events. Revisiting again this chart, you will notice that in the level 7 here, there is no green ball. That is an example of a decision that has been made philosophically by our youth play committee about whether or not we want to play green ball in the tournament space for the 12s. The decision was made prior to 2020 that because tournaments were being redefined as intermediate and advanced, that they should all be yellow ball within our section. So all that means for you all is if you're traveling and playing a level 7 and you have a 12 and under player, just be aware that in other sections, green ball might be an option, but within our section, we are strictly a yellow ball ranked play space section. A little bit about the Mid-Atlantic ranked level 6 and 7 events. These are intermediate round robin events. The value of these events is player development and multiple matches in a shortened format. So for the level 7s, those are one-day events. The players are going to be playing up to 4 matches in a day. Win or lose, they're playing up to 4 matches in a day, but it's short format, single set to 6. For these level 7 events, if the draw is not limited, everybody gets in. Unfortunately, as we all know in a COVID world, we have had to limit draws. And in that case, when a draw is limited, selection is from the bottom up. What does that mean? Unranked players get priority into these events. Similar to the level 7, the level 6 is a Slightly longer format, 1 to 2 day event, playing 2 out of 3 short sets with a tiebreaker in lieu of the third. Again, the player can expect to play up to 4 matches over those 1 or 2 days, win or lose. Selection to level 6 is top down by ranking. Now, in a non-COVID world, we would put as many 6s and 7s on the calendar as we possibly can. The reality is, given COVID, we've had to have limited draws and limited events. We hope to see that change as we head into 2021. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on the level 5 events. The level 5 events are changing. They're changing for a variety of different reasons. This is the first tournament where you're going to see a traditional draw, what we call a feed-in championship, which means that all players who lose matches in the front draw will be fed into the consolation play in the back draw. This is the first tournament where we step up to 2 out of 3 sets with a tiebreaker in lieu of the third. Caveat to that, when we are indoors and very limited on courts, the regulations do allow us to go down to a shorter format in the consolation of 2 out of 3 short sets. The expectations for players in this space is to play until they are eliminated from the draw or the consolation stops. Again, because we sometimes have court limitations, there are situations where the consolation may not play to completion, but it is the expectation that players in this intermediate tournament space play all the matches they're scheduled. Now, the big change that's happening is as we go to one national system, we as a section are limited by national regulations to how many level 5s we can have. Because of that, it is important that all level 5s be draws of 32 when we possibly can. We will also be adding events in the summer months when kids are out of school that include both singles and doubles at the same event in the level 5 space. So what does the limit of 20 events mean? It means in a calendar year under USTA regulations, I can only schedule a maximum of 20 tournaments, say in the boys 12 space, that are earning level 5 points. Whether that's in singles, doubles, or mixed doubles, I'm limited to 20 opportunities. Trust me, I've done the calculations. We're going to be fine. There will be plenty of events out there. Now, really, really, really important to understand. With the new point structure, you may have noticed that there's a differential between level 5, level 4, and level 3 national points. That is pretty significant. Again, this goes to a little bit of a redefinition about what level of a tournament is appropriate to play. It is really important that everybody understand that a level 5 is intended for intermediate players as they transition into advanced events. Our advanced players who are regularly qualifying for level 3 and level 4 events will have expanded opportunities to play at the higher level, both within our section and across section lines. All right, we're going to launch another ELF poll here. And then we'll transition into the end and open it up for questions. Give our ELFs a little time here. So the question is, how important is it to have a USTA official at a level 5 event? This is really important, and I will get to why I'm asking this question later on in the presentation. Everybody, I know this is running a little long, but just bear with us. We're getting there. And again, if you have to hop off, just remember it's being recorded. Okay, so this is interesting. Very important regardless of the cost. Let's come back to this later in the presentation. I needed to know the answer to that question, so hang tight, everybody. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the level 3s and the level 4s. There's not a huge change between level 3s and level 4s as they are currently run in the section, have been run for many years, and will continue this way in 2021. We will continue to offer draws of 32. Now, I will tell you, we've made the decision that all age divisions will run draws of 32. And in some cases over the summer months, those draws will be expanded to 48. But the formats remain the same. We generally play 2 out of 3 sets with a tiebreaker. However, at the level 3, we're going to be playing 2 out of 3 full sets in the main draw court scheduling permitted. Now, we as a section get 4 open level 4s and 4 closed level 4s. We're going to revisit those again because that's important. We also will be allocated a closed level 4 team event. And again, we're going to offer also mixed doubles in both the level 3, level 4, level 5 space and 6s and 7s. Mixed doubles will now be a part of this. In terms of level 3s, the section is still allocated 2 closed level 3s. We typically run those in January and June. Also important to note, there are lots of open level 3 events on the national schedule in addition to our 2 closed events. That brings us to the next very important hot topic, event registration and deadlines. With us going to one national system and the list being published weekly on Wednesdays, our registration deadlines are going to change. First and foremost, all of you need to forget the days of 11:59 p.m. Okay, this was mandated by national. The typical time of deadlines will be 6:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That 5:59 p.m. as in 6 o'clock. Sorry, let's be clear. Dinner time, check your deadlines. Make sure you've done what you need to do. The other thing that I want you to notice is that the deadlines are backing up considerably. In the case of a level 3 and a level 4, the deadline will be the Wednesday the week prior. That is 10 days prior to the start of the event. This is not something we came to on our own as a section. This is something we worked out in conjunction with our neighboring sections, in particular, the Northeast Corridor sections, including Eastern New England, and most importantly, Middle States, because we border Middle States, okay? We have aligned our deadlines. The aligning of deadlines is important. It is also important to note that deadlines will be staggered, okay? That means that a player who is not selected to a level 5 will be notified they weren't selected and have enough time to subsequently register for 6 and 7 on the same weekend. This is something, a practice we have tried to do, we've normally done. With COVID, we've had to back it up a little bit, but we are hoping to return to it. I also want to make note that national events have a different deadline. They are 11:59 a.m. as in noon on Thursdays, typically 3 to 4 weeks prior to the event. Before we jump into what this looks like in COVID, I want to revisit the importance of open versus closed. Remember, we talked about section quota lists for national championships. I want you to carefully understand and consider that the section closed events basically provide a protected pathway to national championships. All other events, so besides our closed level 4s, which we have 4 of, and our closed level 2s, everything else is going to be open. So playing those closed level 4s and 3s, you're a little bit protected because you're only competing against other kids in our section for those spots. So I wanted everybody to understand the importance of playing section closed events. Okay. So time to be a little bit of a bummer. We are still in a COVID world. We need to face the realities of that COVID world. Typically by this point in the year, I have already released a full calendar. I've told everybody here's when all the events are happening. You can plan out your entire year. It's 2020, guys. That's not happening. As you know, we've had to revamp our entire schedule, and I would much rather be conservative on releasing that information versus putting a bunch of information out there that's incorrect and then having to recorrect it. As such, we will not be releasing the year calendar until we understand the implications of hosting indoor events in the first quarter of 2021. As you know, we typically have high-level events indoors. Our ability to host those or not has a direct impact on the remainder of the schedule. Now, that being said, we also understand that our highest level players have had very few opportunities to play. As such, we are working in close collaboration with the national staff and all 17 sections to be sure there is a comprehensive plan for 2021 national levels 1 through 3. In particular, we are looking at alternative paths for kids whose rankings may have tumbled because they haven't been able to play. We are also looking at increasing potentially level 2 events if we can to try to mitigate all the cancellations that have happened in 2020. Can't promise it'll all come to fruition, but please understand that we understand the challenges of our highest ranked players and we're trying to do something about it. For those of you who want to find the schedule when it's out, it will launch on our junior resources page. If you're not familiar with this page, I strongly encourage you to bookmark this page. This is where we will release any important updates. This is where the 2021 regulations will be posted. This is where the recording of this webinar will live. Okay, so when, Rachel, are you going to start posting events for 2021? Unfortunately, because of the challenges we're having with facilities, I am still on a schedule of only posting events approximately 3 to 4 weeks in advance. In particular, as you all know, cases continue to rise and facilities are getting a little bit nervous. So I need to give them that time before they confirm and commit to hosting events. So what does that mean for when play will begin in 2021? It's our hope, and we're planning on it, to start play January 16th, that is Martin Luther King weekend. But again, it will depend on the COVID restrictions across our region. COVID permitting, fingers crossed, we do intend to run the indoor level 3 Martin Luther King weekend, if at all possible. Will we be offering events at all levels indoors? Yes, we hope so. But to be fully transparent, it is a lot easier for us to squeeze in a 6 or a 7 here and there than have to schedule 8 divisions of a level 3, level 4, or level 5. For obvious reasons about fairness and access to national points, if I can't put all 8 divisions of a level 3 on the calendar, I'm not going to do it because it would be unfair to some players or another. So again, that's a slightly more complicated schedule issue. Similarly, we face some challenges in the 10 and under space just because of the density of those events, how many kids there are, how many parents, etc. So we hope to be running 10 and under. Our plan B, if we're not able to run a ton of 10 and under in January and February, is to expand play opportunities as soon as we can go outside in the spring. Heavy question, are you going to keep limiting draws? I'm afraid so. The reality of where we are with COVID and gathering restrictions across our section, we're probably looking at continuing to have to limit draws at least through the winter. I hope it starts to ease up in the spring. We've gotten some questions about playing across section lines, because if you happen to live where I do in Southwest Virginia, you know that North Carolina is playing a lot of tournaments. Yes, you can play across section lines in a COVID world. However, it is the player's responsibility to make sure that they comply with all travel restrictions and quarantines on both ends in order to facilitate play across section lines. So where do we find tournaments when they go live in 2021? New year, new program, new software. You may have seen this link at the top of your page in Tennis Link. If you click on it and look for tennis tournaments in our area, you won't find very many because, again, I haven't posted, but you are welcome to play around with the new platform. I will caution you that I received some questions from parents today. We're like, it's not working quite right. What's going on? The new platform is rolling out in stages. So what you're seeing, if you click on it today, is one version of tournament search. Additional enhancements will be added daily for the next few weeks. So if you're wondering it's not super easy to search because I can't click on this or that, refresh, try again in a couple days. It may look completely different. I did have one question come in today about the ability to sign up for more than one national level 2 in February. Again, that's tied to some of the conversations going on about how to mitigate play in Q1 at the national level. So stay tuned for that one. Very quickly, I want to go over entry fees for 2021. Please understand, we understand that tennis can be an expensive sport. We do not take these decisions lightly about assigning costs for tournaments. However, and I can assure you we've done hours and hours of calculations, there are real costs for our providers in running tournaments. This includes court costs, insurance, depending on the facility and how they're set up, balls, trophies, and the tournament director's time. So we have set these fees based on very real costs to the provider and still trying to keep it in balance with what is manageable for our players. Anytime we have to look at more expensive tournament fees, we get a little bit sad, but that's just the reality of where we are. And again, just because we're offering tournaments every weekend is not the expectation that you are playing every single weekend. Now, remember that level 5 question I asked about officials? The yet to be determined in the level 5 space is because we currently require officials in the level 5 space. That is a huge cost factor for our providers. In the new system, there's really no difference between running a level 4 32 draw feed-in consolation that's using the exact same format as a level 5 32 draw feed-in consolation if they both have officials. They're essentially the same cost to the provider. So we've left this as to be determined because we're still exploring how to mitigate that, whether we make officials optional, as long as it's disclosed, things like that. So we're still working on that piece. All that being said, we recognize that COVID has had significant impact on every family in the Mid-Atlantic, and there are costs that some can't manage. So before we open it up for questions, I want to highlight our junior scholarship program. This is an award-winning program. We won an Aspen Institute Project Play Champion Award in 2020. It offers scholarships at every level of play. We have beginner, intermediate, and advanced scholarships. The beginner is up to $250. The intermediate is up to $500, and the advanced is up to $1,000. And those grants can be used to cover the costs of lessons, training, equipment, tournament fees, and travel. So if you are in a financial bind and you still want to keep your kids in tennis, please, please, please apply. We want to support you as best we can. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions, but before I do, I just want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded, and if you need to hop off, don't worry, we will forward you the link to the webinar, including all of the Q&A as well as the written Q&A at the end of the session. With that, Lindsay, Warren, got any questions for me?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Warren, do you want to share the first question?
Yeah, we'll go with the first one. Do national tournaments L1, L2, L3 count towards in-section tournaments in quota lists for national championships, or they count as out of section?
So if you play a level 1, level 2, or level 3 that appears on the national calendar, but is sanctioned in our section, I believe it will count towards section play in the quota list, but I need to double check that because it is possible that it's programmed to only accept those that are closed at the level 3 level, but I will confirm and we'll make that a follow-up question.
Thanks, Rachel. We received a question around if a level 6 is an intermediate event, what was the rationale around the selection process choosing kids from the top down?
So in an ideal world, it was a large draw event, and selection from the top down, quite honestly, didn't even come into play before we hit a COVID world. In most cases, all players were getting into the level 6 event, and the player order list was not a factor. If we see issues once we've returned to normal patterns of play around the selection process for level 6, we will make an adjustment and try to figure out an alternative path. We don't want to shut anybody out of the tournament space, so that's something that I'm well aware of as a concern and we are studying.
Thank you, Rachel. We've also received a few questions around how nationals being proactive around the impact of national level 1 and level 2 events and the impact that has on some of our higher ranked players.
So I can speak to this one personally because I'm a parent of a player who was highly ranked in the section, and I understand where the concerns are coming from. Second of all, I want to let you know that there are weekly section calls across all 17 sections, as well as weekly calls with national staff. One of the things that came out of the most recent cancellation from Winters was what I would call an emergency task force of realizing that we weren't going to be able to return to our best practices play pattern. So I have spent the better part of the last week and a half on emergency calls as a member of that task force, trying to mitigate a solution. As soon as we land on a solution and it is approved by the junior competition committee, you will see communications from the national level. But we are very proactive and we are hands-on and involved in that process. Next.
That may be it. Warren and I are continuing to monitor the questions. Go ahead, Warren.
I'll go one more. Is every section offering an open L4, Rachel?
Yes, so every section, just like we are allocated 4 open level 4s, every section in the country is authorized open level 4s. And for the most part, I can guarantee you that our neighboring sections of Middle States, Midwest, and Southern will all have open level 4s. And in particular, Midwest and Southern have larger facilities and therefore can accommodate larger draws. For those of you who are familiar with like Cary in North Carolina, it's a huge 40-something court facility. So those draws for the open level 4s that are drivable will be larger potentially in the Southern section. With that, if we don't have any more questions, we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind you about the key email addresses. And as always, reach out, let us know if you have questions. I personally will review all the questions that came in and we'll make sure that a comprehensive document is sent out answering all those questions. And with that, I thank you very much. Hope everybody has a happy holidays and we're here to help you if you have questions. Take care, everybody.